Hello and welcome. We are so glad you're here. My name is Lindy, my coworker Krysten, and Charlee. We're here today. We're going to talk about how to be a good advocate and how do you know if you are a good advocate or if you could be a good advocate, wherever you may fall. So, ladies, I'd love to hear from you. Like when we're thinking through advocacy, if I'm an advocate and I'm thinking either about becoming into advocacy with EMA or I already am, how do I know if I could make a good advocate? Like what comes to mind as far as what are key principles, key characteristics?
It's a great question.
I think it's a good question. I think right off the bat, if you're breathing, you can be a good advocate.
Oh, simple.
You can join our community. Okay. But truly, honestly, I think if you have a heart to just want to be in the gap with somebody, a willingness to be a friend, to be a sister, to a stranger. I think that is the beginning of what it makes to be a good advocate. And then, of course, we can go into the details of our current advocacy program, but just a willingness to sit with somebody.
Yeah.
Hear them and love them is what we're looking for.
It's a deeply relational ministry is what we often say. And so you have to want to be able to like invest that time into building relationship. It's not a one and done outreach opportunity where you can come in and give out some food or a backpack, but it is like journeying with someone through their crisis that maybe you relate to, maybe you don't. And that's okay.
What about like key characteristics for me as a person? I can breathe, right? I am breathing.
Check.
Like,
I'm
got
alive.
that. What about like personality or demeanor or character qualities? Like what are we looking for and what are really vital for the advocacy process that is relational? What comes to mind there?
I think the first for me is humility, is knowing that if you are an advocate, you're not better than somebody because of that position. But even just remembering your own needs and that when we are at our greatest need, we need community.
Yeah.
We need somebody in our corner. And just knowing that advocacy is your chance to be that for somebody else. It's not that you are bringing in a solution, that you are a teacher, but really humbly as a human being, hey, if I were in this position, I would love to have somebody in my corner. Yeah. And so I'm going to be that for someone who doesn't have someone in their corner yet.
That's good.
Yeah. And laying down like your perceived idea of what a win is or what a success is. Because I think a lot of us enter into this space, we talk a lot about exploitative tendencies and then in comparison to redemptive tendencies. And that is joining a mom in her season of crisis with this idea that like her end result reflects me and my investment into her. And that's not true. And so kind of with your point on humility, it's like laying down that I get to plant these seeds and trust in a greater power that we know as Jesus to really water and grow that. And that is time and time again enough of what our investment looks like.
Yeah, so with the redemptive side of things, I think any of us would hear that and be like, yeah, totally. I'm for that. I agree. But with advocacy, like where are there really natural or common like slip points of like, I agree with that in my head. But in my advocacy and my heart to care for someone and my heart of meaning well, I may miss the mark somewhere. Like, is that language? Is that an intention? Is that a character trait? Like, where do we see that maybe slip unintentionally, even though I'd say I agree with that? What comes to mind?
Do you have something?
That was a great question. Well, I was listening to what Charlee was saying. When we start to equate our success to whether or not someone is complying to our vision of what advocacy is where we begin to miss the mark. And when you think of redemptive advocacy and an approach of redemptive love, it's really just coming in and seeing there is something bigger than us that can do a work greater than what we can do. And so we begin to remove ourselves from that position of God, that position of Holy Spirit, where there's that work and that change that's happening in a person, and step into and not avoid that space of, I'm just here to toil the soil, to nurture the soil with you. And so I think once we begin to step outside of this I'm just a piece of maybe a watering or a planting, and not necessarily the growing and the molding of what's happening in this person's life. If we begin to step outside of that, then we go into a lane that can lead us outside of a redemptive approach. It's now, what can I do to solve this problem, to fix you, essentially, instead of what can I do to just love and water this seed and this person that is before me. And so, like, for me, I think it's different for each person of what it looks like and what it sounds like. But the moment we start to step outside of just our awareness that my role in this is not to be Holy Spirit, not to fix, not to solve, but truly just to love. And like, where do we start there? Like, there's so much in love. How am I patient with this person? How am I being kind with this person? How am I being available to this person? And staying in there, that is, staying rooted in love is difficult. And so the moment we start to step outside of that is where I think we begin to lose the mark of what redemptive advocacy looks like. And we get to notice that because we're now taking on a position that's not ours to carry. That's that Holy Spirit, that work, that I'm seeing you as a problem and not as a person.
Yeah. Anything to add?
I would just add, it's so easy. Like, I think one of the slips and the missteps as advocates is we get connected to this very vulnerable demographic. And it's easy. We talk a lot about having this like non-judgment or this like judgment-free zone. And that's easy to say and hard to do when you're face-to-face with a mom that is extremely vulnerable and in many ways the marginalized woman and child that has fallen into the cracks of our society and is unseen, unheard, misunderstood. It's easy for us to also misunderstand. And so sometimes we experience our teams and volunteers being like, oh, like if she just, or like she's not ready, or she doesn't want it, where we can then kind of flip the script of kind of going back to like, if our fixing isn't working and we're no longer seeing love as enough, now we're shifting blame on, oh, you've chosen this. And we fail to like seek to understand and really be in close proximity with this mom and her lived realities and deepest pain points by having a posture of first listening to understand, like, who are you and why has your past and your current circumstances and present crisis affected the way you're making decisions right now, and like loving you through that versus being like, I only want to see and foster change, or we only see and foster change when you are willing to do that too.
Yeah,
no, I think there's a tension in that that I've even experienced myself. Is sometimes it can feel like it's coming from a place of love, where it's like, man, I'm such a champion of this woman. Why doesn't she just do this? Like, she's got all, like, from my point of view, she has all of this ahead of her. And I have to correct myself if I ever get there. And we always want to redirect if we hear somebody else, because we are beginning to lose sight of the opportunity ahead of us when we do start asking those questions or making those statements. Like, she just doesn't want this. Or, you know, she's got all of this. Why is she still in this situation? Or if she had just done this. And there's so much harshness in that. And I think that's where the tension is, to recognize there could be a lot of love for this person, but there could be a lot of harshness in the approach of how we're trying to love. And so taking that care, because you want to see people win. You want to see people succeed. But life is hard. We have to remember, what is she walking through? What is she going through? And it's not about us. It's not about the way that we feel and the tensions that we are carrying. But how can I be present with this mom right here, right now? And not look at, hey, this is why this isn't happening. Or if you just done this, this wouldn't happen. That's so unfair. And it doesn't take into consideration her full humanity. And what she's needing and what she's needing just for that day. And what we can do and where we can meet her is, okay, you're here today. You showed up today. Like, what do you need right now? How do I love and care for you right now? Even if it's the same conversation you feel like you've been having for weeks with this woman. If it's the same conversation in week 10 and that you were having in week 1 of your parenting, for example, time in this program, but going back there and remembering her, like, what's today like? What was this week like? What has this experience been like for you? And just taking out our own idea of success for her and just being present with her.
And when we've been investing into someone we see this, where it'll have been like 6 weeks. And we're like, nothing's changed.
Yeah.
And we're like, it's been 6 weeks. Like,
That's true.
from a very, very spiritual perspective, Jesus was gentle and lowly and patient and didn't give up on us after 6 weeks.
That's good.
And so are we willing to make that like long-term investment, again, back to relationship into the women? Not, again, like all of the things kind of re-echoing of laying down our own ideas of success for you and understanding that in 6 weeks, not much changes in any of us in 6 weeks. No. And so we can't expect that of someone if we don't do it ourselves.
Well, I think that's like when we use the language, if it's so relational, it's like, lovely. That sounds so nice. But when you think about like, what is relationship? Like the depths of, if you're going to live relationally and use relationship as your like main source forward in this advocacy, it's the ups and downs. It's the patience. It's the humility. And without that, also the relationship piece, right? Like with the humility. And if I don't want to like put words in her mouth or put my expectations on her, it's that lived experience of like, it's actually not about me. But I might have well-intended, like a heart from a good place, and yet I make it about me when she hasn't met expectations in 6 weeks or X, Y, or she hasn't responded with eagerness to this great opportunity, and she doesn't seem as grateful as I think she should be. It's like we're saying these things, and it's like, yes, and the felt experience is so much harder, I think, than most of us realize. And so that humility, too, of like being teachable along the way. That relationship's hard. Relationship requires patience. It requires me to be aware of my expectations that she may not be able to meet. And that's probably not the point in the first place, right? Like the point is not for her to come and meet my expectations.
Yeah.
And that is hard perspective to hold.
Yeah.
When our hearts mean so well and we just want good for her. And yet like it's her journey. It's not ours.
Yeah. And I also think, Krysten, you've said this before. Correct this quote if I missay it. But like everybody has a 10.
Put a 10 on everyone's head.
10 on everyone's head.
I don't know there's like a for sure saying, but essentially everyone has a 10.
But it is. And the essence of it is believing in the best in people.
Yeah.
And relationships are hard for all of us.
That's good.
Like our own relationships are hard. And now we're building a relationship with someone that's a complete stranger and like welcoming them into our lives and also in ways expecting them to welcome us into theirs. And so back to like laying down our own judgments and preconceived ideas and notions about people that we don't know and we probably don't understand. Yeah. Even if some of our past is relatable, like even if I did experience domestic violence as a young mom or I was a teen mom, we still come from different stories and there's different paradigms like to be explored. And like believing in this is a hardworking, strong mom with a ton of inherent value and dignity, that's going to change the way I approach you. And you mentioning like it's what's felt on the other side of mom when those things are absent. When you come in as like a problem to be fixed instead of a person to be loved, that is felt from a mom's side.
For sure. So, okay, to wrap us up here, because we could easily just keep going. That's the challenge. But to wrap it up, I'd love to hear from each of you. Like, can you think of real examples of tiny wins where, like, from the outside, if I'm stepping in and I'm like all charged up to do this work, and I might expect like this level of wins, like, but what do we also consider wins in relationship with mom that might be tiny, but like let's give that credit because it's still so fruitful?
That's a good question.
Do examples come to mind for you?
I think for me, mom showing up because trust takes time. Yeah. And mom is trusting us, Ema, her advocate, with her space. Yeah. And with the parts of her story that she has shared. And I think over time we might see little indicators that trust is being built. And I think that's really important, is that mom is choosing to allow us into her life. And that is, I think, really healing for a lot of the moms that I have been able to work with personally, just the hurts that have come from broken trust. And now this is our opportunity. Now we might not have a forever relationship with this mom for the rest of her life, the rest of our life. But if we have 3 months, if she allows us 3 years, Like, we just get to be a part of showing love. And every time she shows up, even if it's not how we would want her to show up, the fact that she did show up is showing, I trust you enough in this space. And I think that's something for us to honor and to not take for granted. And practically, that looks like her showing up in a session, or it sounds like her showing up, or maybe she shares a little bit more. Yeah. And what do we do with that? How do we meet her in her place of, I'm here? Because she didn't have to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, we lose sight of, she showed up today.
And that was a huge
like
win.
She chose to be here. And so pay attention to that.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That's really good.
I would just add like any kind of unsolicited like update from mom or where you're starting to experience a little bit of like her investment into this relationship as well. And I love that way you phrase it, where she's like trusting you with little parts of her story and like a little update of so-and-so got into the daycare we applied for that she thought to tell you because she knows you're in her corner. Like at the end of the day, that's why she's telling you. And she knows you're fighting for those micro wins alongside of her throughout the week.
And both very touching on trust and her then choosing to lean in on her own versus unprompted or asked or required, right? That's a big deal. Very fruitful. Love that.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.